So now I'd like to turn it back over to Bill, who's going to teach us about some things we should think about before we start hiring or put the wanted ads out there, how to make sure that we're asking the right questions when we get a candidate in for an interview, and how to make sure that we're getting the best possible team for our businesses. So, Bill, you're in charge now.
Okay, that means I have share screen. Here we go. Let's see, where am I at? Here. Share. Where did it go? No. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, before we get started, what I'm going to talk about is going to cover whether this is the first time you've ever started to hire or whether this is the 10,001st time. So it's what I put together is the hiring process on this checklist, and I've had a checklist like this for years, and I updated it a little bit. I also put it on the chat. You'll find a copy of it in the chat file. The onboarding process, which is longer. Matter of fact, that's 5 pages. There's some crossover between the two, but you're more than welcome to download both of them and work with them for yourselves, whatever, and ask and call me up and I can help you with them. The reason why you want to have a checklist or a process, when you're out there, there's a lot of things that you can run afoul of as a small business owner, and we'll give you one that'll kind of, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of disparate impact, which is part of the EEOC issue. Just recently, matter of fact, last week, the House of Representatives, it is not law yet, they passed what is called Protect the Older Job Applicant Act of 2021. What this does is allows applicants to file a lawsuit under the Older Worker Protection Act and actually say, hey, you had 200 applications, and out of all of those, you only talked to people that were ages 20 to 25 or 25 to 30. That's all you did. You left out everybody who was 40 and older. Well, as a result of that, then they could then get the EEOC to react, or else they can take and file a lawsuit. It's a process. Those are the things you can run into if you don't have a process that'll keep you on track. And that's what I've created over the years. So the first thing to start out is to do just really, and the other goal of this hiring process is to get your applicants engaged from the very beginning. They're wanting to talk to you. And ultimately you get down to the point whereas your employees are all engaged at this point. They're ready to go. You've given them the information, you've kind of put the hook in, and they're ready to become productive and hopefully long-term employees, because recruiting is expensive. The average cost of recruiting a new employee is, in this country right now, runs around $15,000 plus. That's an average. The low end is a little less, when you're talking about maybe the hamburger flipper, but at the high end where you're talking about technical, professional, executive positions, that $15,000 will balloon to $50,000, $75,000, depending upon what has to be. Another thing that you want to keep in mind before I get into this is a nice little tip. If you can, cross-train employees as much as you can, so that when somebody does leave, at least you've got somebody that can do the job, maybe not as productively or as efficiently, but they can do the job, things can keep rolling, and you're just going to have extra costs built into that, because as I said, someone else doing that job that only does it maybe a couple hours a day to help the cross-training process is not going to be as efficient, nor as productive as somebody who does it all day, 8 hours a day. So with that said, let's take a real quick look at how I built the hiring process and my checklist. And just remember, this checklist isn't necessarily aimed at small businesses. You can modify it, but it's kind of across the board. So it fits all businesses, all sizes. I actually put it together when I was, in the corporate world, and I've kind of, like I said, kind of modified it over the past couple of weeks when Ryan asked me to talk about it. The first thing, the hiring manager, owner, whatever, is going to notify human resources, whoever is going to be in charge of the process, that there's a vacant position. And mostly in small businesses, you're going to know it anyway. The next step down is going to be really what I think the first thing is. You're going to have to look at the budget and see and confirm that everything is in the budget ready for that vacant position. You're not going to hire somebody without knowing what are going to be the costs. Claire, did you raise your hand?
I did. Which checklist are we looking at first?
Didn't it share? It should be checklist hiring process.
I just see a file folder.
Yeah. Bill, we're looking at your File Explorer window. Did you mean to have a document open?
Yes. I thought it would pop right in there. Let me go back and do it. Let me see what happens here.
Because I see that you put it in the chat, but right now all we're looking at is your computer screen.
Yep. And I guess I've got to put this thing into the computer screen.
When you clicked share screen, which option did you select?
Oh, I just selected let me stop the share and go back in.
Okay.
And let me get let me do this first. Now, hopefully that should do it. Ah, there it is. Boom. Now that you should see it.
Hey.
Okay, thank you, Claire. I didn't realize it didn't click in there. Okay, hiring manager. I've got to the vacant position and confirm the budget. I mean, it's, small business, it's pretty easy to confirm the budget, but the more employees you have, the more you want to make sure you've got everything ready to go for that vacant position. Requisition form. A lot of companies want that, whether they're small, medium sized, or large, at least there's something written down. And it's given to human resources at that time. The next thing down there is you got to sit down with the owner, the hiring manager, whatever. And the most important thing is to do a job description. If you don't have a job description, you're really going to have a hard time establishing compensation for the position and justifying it. You're really going to have a hard time justifying how you classify the wage and hour issues, such as non-exempt or exempt. And you want to make sure you've got the job skills, education level, all those things you need to have in a job description that are going to help you place that position and pay that position correctly and properly. And also it helps out if there's any questions, you've got it all written down. Larger companies will post the position internally and then they'll also move it to external. Candidates, this is where kind of like to Claire's issue, knowing the community. But even if you don't know the community, because I've done some remote recruiting to where we filled positions in California that I had responsibility for. And basically, I just had to know what was available in the community for like the positions I was looking for. First of all would be the employment office for the state. Next might be any of the schools, high schools, career schools, vocational schools, 2-year programs like Ivy Tech here in Indiana, and then, college programs or collegiate schools, especially career planning offices became pretty good for me in looking for some positions. And then you just know the newspapers and areas where you can put your advertising to kind of help start. Now with social media, Facebook, sometimes the Chamber of Commerce that you might belong to, they have sites where you can hang up your job posting announcements. There's all different sorts of things being done now in social media that in my time in the world of recruiting that didn't have access to. And you may also just decide you want to outsource that to a staffing agency. You may want to pay a staffing agency to supply you with employees. You also can contact the employment office for the state, wherever you're at, and they'll do all of this work, put ads in the paper, stuff like this. You'd be surprised what they will do. They've really upgraded the programs over the years. Then once you've got that, you're going to have to make sure you have an appropriate application form. Most small businesses go to Staples or Office Depot and just buy a pack of employment applications. That's fine, but also make sure that, and here in Indiana, it's not too bad, but make sure that there's not basically illegal questions on that application. So if you're in let's say if you're in like recruiting up in Chicago, one of the things you can't do up there is you cannot ask on your application about any felony either charges or convictions. And you also cannot ask about past employment history regarding what they were paid. You can ask them how long they were at this place, and you can ask them what place it was at, where they worked, and describe their job, but you cannot ask about what they were paid. That cannot be part of your evaluation. Now that varies from location to location. There is no federal law that says you cannot ask about salary history, but you must be aware of state and local laws. You're also going to get the applicants to sign some sort of background check authorization, at least a preliminary one. And you're also going to have some voluntary EEO forms if you're a larger operation and could fall into that, where you're going to ask about ethnicity of the applicant so that you can you may need that data sometime in the future. Once you've got applications coming in, they're going to be kind of looked through, sorted. You're going to have some keywords you're going to look for, whether on the application or resume. And whoever's in charge of the locating applicants, whether it's human resources or somebody who's designated as the human resources person, is going to start to call and phone and use a checklist to ask questions, get some preliminary. And I use it a lot of times to say, to make it clear, this is the compensation range for this position. Are you still interested? And you'd be surprised how many people would say, well, no, I don't want to, I'm not interested at that range, but is there more? A lot of times it was the answer, no, that's the range that we are paying for this job to start. And if they're not willing to accept that, we go on. They're off the list. That's one of my better knockout questions. In-person interviews, again, you're going to go back using your notes that you had from the telephone conversations with the applicant. You're going to keep all this information. You're going to go back over it again, review the application. It's all a lot of what I like to put in quotes, dirty work at that point. You're just verifying everything, verifying the person's interested. They're willing to accept the job as it's structured, the pay, everything that you've given them in the first process. And again, it's kind of coming around to who else you're going to bring in the second round of interviews, or who are you going to have the hiring manager talk to, to proceed down to where you eliminate ultimately applicants and get your selected candidates for the job, the top candidate completely. And you're answering all of their questions at that time too. For human resources, switching back to what I would do, not only are my notes important that are put in the file for that and attached to that application, but also the hiring manager's notes. Anybody else the hiring manager has or wants to have this person talk to, or even if you do a panel interview where you may have anywhere from 3 to 7 at the most, never go any beyond 7. I've been in ones larger than that. God, I hope your deodorant is good, because it really gets to be, notorious at that point. But you also have that checklist, and all those people in that panel interview basically have to follow a process so that they don't ask questions that they should not ask, like, oh, I see here you have a couple of kids, or do you have daycare or childcare for them? You can't ask that question. Or do they go to school? A lot of different things that some used to ask a long, long time ago. You could do that, but you cannot do that today. You have to kind of use a backdoor question to get the answer to that, or get some indicator. But all of those interview questions, all of that process is captured by human resources or the business, and it has to be maintained with all those applications of people you talk with. Because believe you me, sometime down the road, somebody's going to get their nose out of joint, and they're going to go to some agency, and that third-party agency is going to now be knocking on your door and looking at what you did, or you're going to have a summons into court. The next thing you're going to do in this process is the top candidate, that's old, is you're going to do now a more complete background check. You're going to find out everything you can. I'll give you an example. In my career, I did one, and it was pretty standard. This was a guy we were looking at hiring for our plant engineer. Had some impeccable resume in that, and I went going through and checking his references, checking the dates. And one of his references, I just asked the question, I just wanted to verify that he went to school while he was employed at this business. And as we talked, all of a sudden red flags started popping, because the employer was saying, what school? What training? He couldn't verify the training. And so I ended up calling the university to where he said he went to school, talking with the registrar's office, faxed them down a copy of the certificate, or actually the diploma for a Bachelor of Science, BS in engineering. And when they got it, and they got back to me 2 days later and told me it was a fraud. It was a doggone good copy, but it was a fraud. They recognized right away. So as a result, I withdrew the job offer was out there. I withdrew it and told him why. When I told him that the university confirmed that his diploma that he had given us is, in the file, in the record, was a fraud, there was a lot of silence at the other end of the phone. What he had done was he had gone to some continuing education courses, got a certificate, and turned that into a diploma. Nice photoshopping. So it's important to do and check the background. I worked for one company where certain positions we had to have a private investigator check the backgrounds before they were hired. Then you go down again. The next step is you discuss everything. You agree on the job specifics for the candidate. This time you're only just talking with your internal hiring manager, making sure everything that is going to be put in the job offer is understood by all parties and meets company policy, that the hiring manager or anyone else said anything out of turn. You make sure everything is as it should be, and then I get ready to call the candidate, and I will call them and give a verbal offer. And if they accept that verbal offer, then I follow it up with a formal written offer. And then the candidate at that point, is ultimately says yes or no, and everything is then started for them to come in. Once he accepts it, then of course I send a letter to any other candidates we talk to saying we filled the position, and basically try to say thank you for talking with us, and good luck with the other opportunities you may have. And then finally, that's the other thing that's in the chat, the onboarding process, which I'm not going to go through. That's 5 pages long. It can be shorter, it can be longer, but that's what I used. Those 5 pages came off of a policy procedure I had, and I took the name of the company off to protect the guilty parties. But that onboarding schedule is set up, day they report to work, what they need to bring with them. Everything is kind of all prepared, and I get a checklist all prepared for that candidate to come in, that onboarding process. So we make sure we have all the papers, everything gets completed, and it may take the first day, may all be just doing paperwork, policies and procedures, depends upon the job. And the other parts of the onboarding procedure may take another day, where we'll just basically coordinate a tour depending upon how large the facility is. I mean, everybody's got to know where to go to the bathroom on the first day, and so forth. So you're pointing that out, showing them where their desk is, where their parking space is, if that's necessary, things of this sort. You're all doing that, as well as getting all of these forms, I-9s, benefits, federal and state tax forms, anything you can just about think of that has to be prepared and set up for the employee to fill out and do that. Now, today, a lot of this stuff is not done by paper. A lot of it is electronic. Sometimes you may have that set up with your payroll company. You may have something where you have already an HRIS system that has all of this in there, and there's an employee sign up part which takes care of everything electronically, including all the benefits, everything. They make their choices online, and some companies have them set up to send the employee alerts, so that hey, the date for where you have to turn this in is coming up. It's needed by this date. Because you'll be surprised, a lot of employees won't know their spouse's social security number, their kids' information, birth dates included. And so that's all done on the computer, and it's just turned over. That's how fancy some of these systems are getting. In my day, I basically just had to have a little written tickler file, and myself say, oh, got to contact this employee today and get their kids' birth dates on the health plan. And then, walk over to where they were working at and get that information, or get them on the phone if they were a salesperson or working remotely, and tell them, let's get the information, and I would be filling it in. And then the last thing that is done in the hiring process, just about every state in the union has a new hire reporting system. It used to be by paper. I would have a form for the state of Indiana, would have to fill it out by hand, and then I could either fax it in or would mail it in. Now they all have it on their websites, and you can just go in there and you put the employee's name in and the appropriate information, the date they started work. It's somewhat that the state wants to be nosy, but they also want to check to see if that employee was drawing unemployment compensation. So they're going to balance it against that. If there's any other aid they were getting from any state or local agency, they'll have that information to turn off that aid or to reduce it. You'd be surprised what all the things that the state will do to just tick down through once you supply that you've hired this information, hired this individual. And if you are actually hiring a lot of people, it can be a lot of work. I usually would turn it over to my assistant, who would go in there and, take all of the information and just make sure it was all done. Because sometimes we were sending in, during seasonal hiring, we might be sending in 50 to 100 notices, either through fax or by paper at that time, but electronically the same thing. So it took time to fill it all out and get it done. But that's the process. It's really, I just went through it, kind of just throwing it out there and saying, nope, there it is. Any questions about all the fun and games as far as bringing on a new employee?
Yeah, Bill, I have a question for you. What app or service would you recommend for conducting a background check?
I personally, I like the place. God, what were they called? They're out in Danville. Safe Hiring Solutions. I had used that company a few times out there. And they were a vendor. And I would just turn over the information, what he needed. This guy was a former state trooper and he knew how to go through the system and find the information, court orders, and then he just basically provided me with a report, and it was up to me at that time in the larger corporation, to decide whether we're going to hire that person based on his recommendation or his report, because he never said one way or the other, unless he found something that was a felony that was quite serious, and it did happen a couple of times. But that's who I used, was out in Danville. It was called Safe Hiring Solutions, but there's a bunch of others around. There's private investigators you can use. You can, and like I said, I did some background checking myself. The only thing is, when you use a third party, please remember you have to comply with the Fair Credit Reporting Agency rules. And they're rather specific. And usually any vendor that you use to check employee background will know these rules and will give them to you and make sure that everybody is compliant. And you do have to give some information to the applicant that you're doing this. Yeah, Claire, I see your hand up.
I do. I have a couple questions, and some that you might not know, but what is the best way to find employees, in your opinion? As you can understand, the market is very competitive right now. I think everyone is hiring. I know I'm looking for more high school kids and fresh out of high school kids. So what websites do you suggest?
Well, kids are always on social media. Probably the best one they have is Instagram, and I don't know too much about it, but I'd also put it on Facebook and probably use Twitter. I'm sure Ryan could tell you a little bit more about Instagram than I know. That would be one thing on social media. The next would be, if Rose City Bowl belongs to the Newcastle Chamber, you might get the name of the director of the Newcastle Chamber, and he could give you the name of, say, the guidance counselors at the high school.
Okay.
And also, I don't know, does Newcastle have a vocational school up there?
I don't know.
Okay, they'll be able to tell you that too. I'm sure that I know they have an IB Tech
Yes.
school, and that's the other place I would go to. And just have them put it on their job board, whether it's electronic. Some of them will say, "Here, give you access." They'll give you a password or passcode to get into their job board, and you can place your own position. The high schools probably won't do that. And if you're hiring kids that are under age 17, the child labor law changed in Indiana, where now Indiana, the school doesn't have to issue a work permit. Indiana now issues one electronically, and you go through this system. So you'll have to take a look at what the Indiana Department of Labor has set up for hiring youth. It's a whole new system. It used to be you just called the administration office for the school system and let them know you were going to hire a high school kid, and the high school kid had to go there and pick up a work permit and bring it back to you. But it's done differently now. High schools have been taken out of the loop.
Gotcha.
So you have to deal with the Indiana Department of Labor.
Okay. My next question you might not know because it's the step after hiring. Here they are still writing paper scheduling, and I am needing an electronic online scheduling system. And what do you know anything about those? What the most effective is?
I don't know which the most effective is, but I'm going to ask a question. Does Rose City Bowl use a payroll vendor?
I'd have to ask how he does payroll, but everything is written down in paper and pencil.
Okay. Probably he does his own payroll or has a CPA do it, which would be kind of what sounds like. If he doesn't, if you're using somebody like ADP or Paychex or some of the smaller ones like ASAP Payroll Services here in Indianapolis, they may have a system that will help you with some of the scheduling, or may have something that's available. I'd have to do a little work to find out what kind of scheduling systems are out there that might fit you. But probably what I'd start off with is just using Google and start building a calendar from that put your kids' names, put the employees' names in it, and get it that way electronically, and then you can always migrate it over to something else.
Okay.
You might also call a couple of the bowling alleys here in Indianapolis that are bigger and find out what system they use.
Yeah, any bowling alley that's far enough away that they don't feel your competition might be willing to give you that information. I even call down towards Cincinnati and see what they use to schedule their employees.
Well, I've been on the scheduling side of the world, but I don't know the back end. So I've tried a couple of like free 2-week trials, and there's ways to calculate revenue versus labor and all that kind of stuff. And this is new for me. So
yeah, well, a lot of what your scheduling mostly would just be by shifts. You hire, whatever your shifts are that you're working, the bowling alley is open. You're just going to be filling in hours, and how many employees do you need in different areas of the, how many employees you need to have to run the bowling alley, and how many employees you need to have to keep track of the arcades. And
cool. Awesome. That's all my questions.
So that's what I would. Jeanette's question is, Jeanette's answer. That's a good thing to go to that. You may also try the chamber and ask them. They may know somebody. They may have somebody who's already in the chamber that does, helps with electronic scheduling systems. Okay. But I'm trying to think. I'd also ask IB Tech.
Okay.
They should have an entrepreneur type class there or program. Accounting for sure. And somebody there, even one of the professors, might be somebody who could help you set up something, whether it's yours to just fit Rose City Bowl, or whether they say, hey, here's what I recommend.
Hey, Claire, depending on if they're using QuickBooks already out there, Intuit has a scheduling portal. And I assume by how the way their software is normally priced, it would be an add-on component, but it does reference on the page that scheduling is one of the features they have. It's also a time clock, so it would connect directly into payroll a little smoother than trying to hop from manual time clock to entering payroll. And Jeanette, please back me up on this if you're familiar with that feature.
Yeah, I've not done any scheduling, but I do know for my contractors, they can actually use their build time, their payroll time to flow into invoices.
Yep.
So there are lots of things that system will do. And if I've not used the scheduling portion of that, but if that's there, and your boss wants to use QuickBooks to do payroll, that makes it very seamless. It's
and if he does have a CPA,
good overall system.
If he does have somebody who's doing the payroll, they may have a system they like, and that may have that module. Hey, Ryan,
yes,
doesn't Keith use Square at Books and Brews?
He does, yes.
I believe that also has a scheduling module in it.
Yeah.
Because it also keeps track of, as Keith told me one day, payroll does all the, when they take an order, it gets it back to the kitchen. There's some functionality to Square that needs to be looked at.
Well, Bill, at the same time, Square still back-end plugs into QuickBooks because Square's more of the business, sales, and getting the product out the door versus QuickBooks, which is your back office, making sure you're making money rather than losing it and that you're fairly paying everyone. I think Square might still just hook right into
It might be, but that may be the other thing to look at too is Square, and I didn't really think about QuickBooks. There's another one out there. You could look at Peachtree if you want to do that one. That's another out there. What I would do also, since I belong to, since Score's available to you, go on indianapolis.score.org and when the website comes up, go up into the query bar and just write in there scheduling systems, employee scheduling systems, and just see what the Score system will throw at you. I mean, the government archives everything, and there's got to be something in there that'll show you, give you some idea of scheduling systems that are out there. I hadn't thought about that until just now, but yeah, that's what I would do is go into Score and just put in their employee scheduling systems and see what it gives you. Play around with that phrase until the system gives you something.
Yeah.
Okay, my turn.
Yep, go Jeanette.
I have a tax client who wants to come work for me. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I want her to come work for me. She is African, literally. She's here. I don't know how long she's been in the country. She's got a couple of children, which seems to be an issue with daycare. She would have to go through the same tax classes that I did. And I'm in a position, I don't want to pay for that for her because it's nearly $2,000 for that class. And then with my license, I have to buy a license for her, which is nearly $500 on top of the price of the program. My program is only set up for one person.
Yep, yeah, second seat.
And with these mandates that the government is putting out, and I know I'm under 100, but what's to stop them from going after smaller companies and making these mandates? And how do I let her down easily, telling her I'm not going to hire her?
Well, the first thing would be she doesn't have the requisite education. that she's going to need. She's got to get all those classes before you can hire her to come to do any taxes at all.
Okay.
And those she's going to have to go. You can give her information of where she has to go to get that if she's interested in doing taxes. It's the same thing that I have. I don't have that big of an issue of it with Primerica, but when I recruit somebody to come on my team for Primerica, one of the first things I'm going to tell them is, even though the company helps them out getting the licenses, there's 3 minimum tests they've got to pass. 4, take that back, 4 on this. And if they don't want to sit down for those or take the classes for them, even though they're subsidized heavily by Primerica, I'll tell them go find someplace else to work, because it's not going to happen. We'll both be spinning our wheels. So in your case, the gal doesn't have any, and I don't care what ethnicity she is, she doesn't have the preliminary information knowledge to make it worthwhile for you to take on that responsibility of hiring someone. So what I would do is just say, here's what you need to even come to work for me or anybody else in the tax preparation world. You've got to have these classes. You've got to have these certificates. And if you don't have them, I can't hire you. I can't even consider you.
Right. I gave her that information probably 2 years ago.
Well, it's probably
updated. I'll
updated.
get the education as well. You have to do it.
Yeah, she's got to come to you. You're a small business. She's got to come to you
fully
with
prepared.
The skills. If she doesn't, that's it. And Primerica is so big, I can bring somebody in that doesn't have the skills if they're willing to take the classes and get the skills, on the schedule we set up.
Yeah. And then the other thing is I'm concerned that she thinks I'm just going to hand my clients to her and let her collect the full fee. And I know that's what she's interested in, is getting the full fee for herself. And that's not going to happen either.
Well, yeah, but she can't even do that without having those classes.
Right.
If she gets those classes, then you could decide to say, okay, you want to take over the business, here's how much you're going to have to pay me.
Yeah.
And because then you're going to take that money and retire.
That's right.
She's going to buy your business. And if she doesn't have that money, it's a moot question. But the big thing is she doesn't have even the preliminary education to come to work. And that's all I do. Is you gave it to her 2 years ago, I'd update it and say, I don't even look, I'm not, somebody has to have this education, these certificates, this background to work for me.
Okay. Well, she's not afraid to work. She holds 3 or 4 part-time jobs. But that being said, that concerns me that she may be overbooking herself.
Well, that could be.
And
but I wouldn't hire her. Even if she had all that stuff, I'd make her an independent contractor.
Well, that was the next question.
Because
I will not hire. I don't want to hire an employee because I don't want the headache.
Nope. You would do it just as I would set it up as an independent contractor.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that tells me how to let her down easily, because I really don't want. Because
I use the education, and that's it. That's the easiest thing to use, because you can't even deal with the IRS or any tax stuff without having that education.
Right. And my concern as well would be, does she want to come here and work here with me? If that's the case, then I've got to provide get another computer.
Oh yeah, you got all those responsibilities.
Yeah. And my business is finally doing really well, and I'm not ready to share my profits yet. I've earned everything I've gotten so far.
And that's perfectly fine. But I would just let her down on the education side. She's got to go ahead and do all that stuff for you to even consider hiring her. Or even making her part, saying, okay, I'm going to let you do 50% of my business. But without that information, because you're liable for whatever she does, even if you take her on as an independent contractor.
Yes. And if she does do all of that, she just might as well do it on her own anyway.
True.
rather than working for me.
And do what you did last year when you acquired that other business. And what did you do? Raise the amount of business you had available by 30%?
It was about 30%. Yeah.
So if she wants to get into the tax preparing business, she's going to have to take the classes. She can go to HR Block. She can go wherever. She can go where places you recommend, but you can't have her work for you without that background.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Any other questions for Bill? All right. Well, let's give Bill a hand for his presentation.
Thank you.